During my formative years in childhood, I attended a social gathering in which I heard people at times articulate a very basic statement: to whom much is given, much is required. Eventually, I found myself in a lineman apprenticeship program. And at one point, it held my rapt attention to know that a couple of my instructors had actually gone to a couple Polynesian islands to share with the people who lived in that community some of the skills, knowledge, and attitude that it takes to build and maintain electrical circuits. And as I matured in the industry and came to work on storms and natural disasters, as I came to connect more and more loads to electrical systems, the more and more familiar I became with how critical these circuits were. There was a painful moment for me at one point in which I lost a dear friend in a fatality in the mountains of Idaho. And while I was going through the grieving process, thinking about my friend and my life and what that meant, I managed to have one of those synchronous moments. I was teaching at the Vista Pre-Apprentice Lineman School, and there were several visiting students who were enrolled in Gonzaga University's master's program for transmission and distribution. And they had told my manager they'd like to come up and see our facility to take a look at lineman training. Well, while I was giving them a tour of the facility, it, for the first time in my life, really struck me what a great wealth disparity there is in terms of intellectual wealth about the knowledge of operating and maintaining electrical systems, particularly from the standpoint of the people who have to actually put their hands on the thing. They were from a small country called Suriname. I've never heard of it at that point, and I had never been out of the United States. I'd scarcely been out of the central part of the country in the Northwest. So when they left on one of those long nights when I was vacillating on the meaning of life, I decided to send them an email and to offer my abilities, whatever they may be, to help them develop a lineman training program. And when I went to the nation of Suriname, and I left the United States for the first time and got to work shoulder to shoulder with other men in my trade, it lifted a veil from my face. Mark Twain has got a marvelous quote about what travel does to people and how it kind of takes the blinders away from us and gives us a broader perspective. Well, while building lines and hooking up services and setting poles and operating a shovel in the nation of Suriname, I lived Mark Twain's words to their fullest. After that, when I returned, I decided the best way to help my brothers in Suriname would to bring them into relationship with my brothers in the United States. I told the leadership at that power company there that I would return with several more American lineman instructors. And they asked me how on earth would I be able to get people to come to this strange nation that most people have never heard of, to toil in the hot sun and perform line maintenance. Well, I knew that answer. I knew that answer because I've seen their faces again and again and again. And so when I returned home, I started speaking and recruiting and getting help. And they came with me. And for a number of years, we took successive trips back to the nation of Suriname with the express purpose of helping them develop in the same way that electrical workers have developed in North America, through community. Within the confines of the United States and Canada, there has been a long tradition of electrical workers from one region moving to another region, and when those workers go from one place to another, they don't just take their physical bodies, they take their knowledge, their experience, their techniques, their approaches, their processes, and in that melting pot of ideas, people for well over 100 years have been able to pick out best practices, been able to determine what things should be observed, what things should be avoided. And in the grand scheme of things, I think that's exactly what electrical workers need in the 21st century. Reclined in a comfortable chair in modern day America, one can easily find themselves on YouTube or social media, and you can affix your gaze to electrical workers working in nations striving very ardently to bring electrical power to their hospitals, to their communities, to their water filtration processes, and see that they go without. In fact, it's not entirely uncommon to pull up videos or pull up images of electrical workers in developing nations horrifically burning on conductors, losing their life in a very tortured and painful process. There was a pioneer in the labor movement in the United States that said, "A loss of one is a loss to all." And that's true in a vast portion of the earth today. A huge amount of people do not have access to the electrical energy that you and I have learned to take for granted. Without electrical energy, women are less likely to receive education. Children are less likely to receive the medical care they need. Children seeking to compete in an international marketplace for their skills and abilities are deprived of an ability to achieve education in the same manner that can be achieved in some other competing nations. If I could do one thing for the world today, it would be relatively straightforward. It would be energy. However, in all honesty, the solution to that is not just a matter of electrical conductors or ample numbers of transformers. It's also the knowledge of how to manage and maintain them, how to troubleshoot them, how to repair them, and how to fix them. A nation with a more equal access to electrical energy does better. A planet where people have more access to electrical energy likewise does better. Whether it's carbon emissions produced from burning combustible organic materials to heat homes and cook food, or the adverse health effects that come from utilizing those sources of energy, or the fact that when people step into the modern day standard of living that you and I take for granted, they have a tendency to be more literate, a tendency to be more communicative, a tendency to embrace peace and not incline upon radicalism. Energy and energy access lifts humanity away from war and terror. It lifts humanity away from famine and deaths associated with waterborne illness, and it lifts humanity to where God has intended human beings to live, a more peaceful, kinder, gentler, healthier planet. The why to do this is relatively simple. The garments in which I wear right now, the device that I drive down the road, the device that I pick up to call my wife, those are not made in my neighborhood. Those devices are made in a community called the planet Earth. These people, irregardless of what nationalistic hate rhetoric some elected leaders choose to use, the truth is those people are my neighbors. I buy my garments from the family who lives next door to one of my dear friends, a lineman in the country of Bangladesh, Rakibul Islam. It's a lineman just like I. He's a father just like I. He loves his wife just like I do. He loves his children just like I do. He loves his coworkers just like I do. But for Rakibul, this next year and the coming years will be years in which he has to endure watching people dying on the job again and again and again as that nation tries to electrify to lift their people out of poverty.